All right. Well, I'm excited to be able to introduce the first 2021 scholar to this series, and that is Dr. Corliss Bean, who's coming to us from Brock University, where she's an assistant professor in the Department of Recreation and Leisure Studies. Dr. Bean may look familiar to you, and she's honoring her time at UBC by wearing her UBC colors. Dr. Bean was Michael Smith Foundation for Health Research postdoctoral fellow, and I had the privilege of working with her for the past 3 years. Dr. Bean already has a well-established program of research. She's very passionate about working with community organizations, specifically in program evaluation around promoting youth and childhood development and physical activity programs. She's a credentialed evaluator. It's hard to believe, but in just less than 6 months under her belt as an assistant professor, she already has 58 publications, 2 SSHRC grants as PI, multiple other grants as co-Is, and I believe in the first 6 months of her appointment, submitted 6 independent grants. She is an absolute outstanding scholar, which speaks to itself, but what you might not see from the CV is just what a powerful and passionate drive and initiative she brings with her to every single meeting, to every single partnership. And it's those reasons why I'm honored to be able to continue to collaborate with Corliss as she continues on her journey. And I'm really excited to see what she's already advanced her research in the last 6 months in this talk. So thank you, Corliss, for bringing, coming and presenting to us today.
Thank you, Mary. I really appreciate the wonderful introduction and the warm welcome. And I will pretend that my blue blazer was intentional to go with UBC blue. I also just wanted to say thank you to UBC Exercise, KIN, and the Health Seminar Program for inviting me here today. And for all those who have attended, I'm very excited to share with you some of the insights into my research and the experiences throughout graduate school and postdoc to date. If I get a chance to share some lessons learned and some learning experiences throughout the way, I am keen to jump on that. So I will dive right in. So yeah, I will kind of go into a background. I don't want to spend too much time going into the literature, but knowing that we all come from very diverse backgrounds here, I do want to set the stage a little bit with context in terms of my research program, but also where I've come from and my academic career to date. And then I'm going to provide you with 2 very different case studies of working with community organizations, but I'll highlight numerous parallels across the 2 community organizations and the process in which those partnerships have unfolded over the past several years. And then I'll wrap up with some lessons learned. So just wanted to get a sense of those that are in the room. I'm not sure how many of you are on. I can't see everybody, but would love to just get a sense of who's in the room in terms of posting in the chat if you're in your master's, your PhD, or your postdoc, just to see who's in the room here. PhD, master's, postdoc. Okay. All right, we got a good group here. And of course, faculty, if there are some faculty online. Amazing. Okay, so we got a good group. And I'm recognizing several names as well from our Okanagan campus and previous lab part. So really great to have everybody on board. Thanks again for joining. So I did want to also just get a sense of how everybody is feeling. I know we're probably over our regenerated phase of having a break over Christmas, and would love for you to take a minute to post in the chat, having looked at our sheep scale here, and how do you feel today? So you can put in the chat on a scale from 1 to 9 how you are feeling. Perfect. Number 3, 5, always 5. That's great. Awesome. We're all over the map. Nothing wrong with that. Okay, a couple of 4s, couple of 4s. All right. Thanks for sharing, guys. Some 7s. Awesome. So hopefully, again, I appreciate you guys joining. I know that it is challenging and living on Zoom nowadays, so I do appreciate everybody's attendance here for sure. Okay, so I will dive right in, starting with a little bit about where I've come from. So back in over 13 years ago, I decided to go to the University of Ottawa, and essentially I went to the University of Ottawa to play hockey and not really to pursue academia, but little did I know that after joining a third year community health class with Dr. Tania Fernandez, who is actually now at UBC, my life changed a little bit and I became very passionate about research and dove into research quite quickly in doing a third year research project, and I haven't looked back since. So I continued to do both my master's and my PhD at the University of Ottawa. And then, as Mary mentioned, in 2017, I joined the Faculty of Health and Social Development under Dr. Mary Jung at UBC Okanagan campus, and I was funded there by Michael Smith. So I spent 3 years there, and right at the end of wrapping up my postdoc, I was able to secure a position at Brock University, which was, I always wanted to settle back in Ontario, so it was a great fit for me, not only academically, but also personally as well. So although on this slide looks quite linear in terms of my timeline and my path, I was quite consecutive in the actual time frame that I went from one degree to the next. Don't kid yourself. I was never on this direct path, knowing I was on this direct path all the way through. Daily, weekly, monthly, I would question myself, what was the right path? Was I going down? Was academia the right choice for me? And all those sorts of great things. So don't panic. If you are in your master's, your PhD, in a postdoc, trying to navigate where to go. It is easy to get sucked into that academic trek once you are on it, but it's okay if you don't know yet. One day a door will open, and just keep your options open and do what's best and what's right for you. So back in December, a faculty of grad studies at Brock actually asked me to do a seminar on preparing a job talk and a job interview based on my recent hire at Brock. And one of those main messages that I shared with the group was thinking about yourself as a complete package and begin to think about, what does that look like? What does it entail? Thinking about when you are applying for future grad school, your next grant application, your dream job, whether that's in academia or not, a next scholarship, start thinking about that. And I'd like for you to think about how you're going to position yourself for that. And as I walk through my talk, I'm going to share with you what my package looks like. And I encourage you to kind of give yourself, that thought as well as you kind of see my pathway through. So for those who are not familiar with my research, I work with community organizations to develop, implement, and evaluate health and development programs, specifically in the area of sport and physical activity. So essentially using the sport or physical activity as a vehicle to promote both physical and psychosocial development. Now, at the heart of that is knowledge translation, and I'll walk you through a few different case examples as I go in terms of something that not only is so valuable in all of our research, but also particularly when we are working with community organizations, and for me, something I'm particularly passionate about. So that picture might be a little bit familiar for those on the Okanagan campus, just right outside our office there. But what I want to just kind of share with you is a little bit of background in terms of my research is grounded really in positive psychology and specifically positive youth development. So again, seeing youth as assets and resources to be developed rather than problems to be managed in society, and then giving them the tools that they need to be able to thrive and be successful in society. So for me, working with all of this positive youth development has been involved working with community organizations at either the local or the national levels. So organizations like Boys and Girls Club of Canada, which I'll share a little case example today, Golf Canada, the Sport Information Resource Center, which is they're a national knowledge broker for sport physical activity research in Canada. And then more locally, thinking about YMCA of Okanagan. And I also sit on a panel for Canadian Tire Jumpstart, so for some of my service work that I do in the community. At the heart of my research program, as I mentioned, is that notion of program evaluation. So working with all of these community organizations at various different capacities and different levels to then evaluate their programming to ensure that they're developing quality programming and getting the outcomes that they want in terms of healthy development for youth and other populations. And I may or may not have a healthy or unhealthy love for my dog, who keeps me mentally and physically sane, particularly during COVID, and she might make a guest appearance at some point throughout my lecture if the doorbell rings or any other fun event happens. So Cole's Notes version of the background literature, as I mentioned, grounded in that notion of positive youth development for predominantly the main area or the main bulk of my research program to date. And this focuses on both individual and community well-being. So before coming to UBC, I solely worked in that youth population. But thinking about how we define when we talk about those outcomes that community programs would like to develop, it's the terminology, just so that you hear this over and over again, would be around life skills. So thinking about those desired assets, strengths, skills that help youth prepare to thrive in society. So those can be things such as teamwork, leadership, emotional regulation, communication, and whatnot. And essentially, the big piece here is that a life skill can't be considered a life skill until that individual that has developed such a skill can transfer that skill to another context. So whether that's home, work, school, their community, thinking about how they're actually being able to apply that to other pieces. Now, the really big important piece here is the notion of being intentional. We often assume that by merely participating in sport or by participating in any sort of program that youth will likely, or anybody will then develop those skills that, if we think about an organization's mission or vision statement, that just by participating, they will develop these skills. But in order to get to that end goal, so developing life skills through those programs and ultimately being able to transfer those skills beyond the program, we need to make sure and think about how the actual program context is structured. So again, that notion of intentionality comes through. If we have higher program quality or quality program delivery, we then lead to higher life skill development and greater opportunities for life skill transfer. However, based on the work that I was doing in the field with community organizations, there was a huge gap between what's being proposed in the literature around that notion of intentionality and what practitioners are doing actually on the ground and what they actually believe is true. So again, many of them kind of hold that notion of notion of life skill development as a byproduct. So by mere participation in a given program, these individuals would then develop or achieve those skills that the program set out to achieve. So that's kind of where a lot of my research started. So I'm going to dive into two different case examples. So the first one being in partnership with the Boys and Girls Clubs of Canada, and the program is called the Bounce Back League. And essentially this is a trauma-sensitive sport program. So again, for the sake of time, I'm not going to dive into the background literature on trauma and sport, but essentially this need was identified by the Boys and Girls Club of Canada to say that a lot of the youth within their programming who are attending their programming regularly have come from disadvantaged communities and thus are more prone to experiencing trauma throughout childhood. So we know that trauma can kind of have this lasting effect on youth into adulthood. So what are some ways that sport can be used as a vehicle to support this? And what the research has shown is that it can act as not only a protective effect, where it protects individuals' mental health for those that have experienced trauma, but also sport can be that facilitator of growth. So youth can actually develop those life skills such as resilience, emotional regulation, and whatnot, and helps them then prepare for the future. So the Bounce Back League was co-created with the Boys and Girls Club of Canada, and essentially this was a 5-year Public Health Agency of Canada grant And the goal was to offer a trauma-informed sport program to youth ages 8 to 12 years old. So essentially, this was a brand new program that the Boys and Girls Club did not have yet, but we worked together as a team, and that team comprised of Boys and Girls Club staff, myself and Dr. Fernierez, and one of her PhD students were comprised. The three of us were the evaluation team. And then there was also a team of trauma-informed experts who were external consultants who helped all of us work together to kind of co-develop not only the program, but also the associated staff training. And what this kind of looked like is over the 5 years, we started with developing and piloting this in 3 sites. And throughout that, we had weekly meetings, had ongoing communication being quite critical. And from that, we came up with those 3 intentional life skills that we thought were most important to focus on within the given program context. So the 3 being knowing how to come to play, so preparing yourself for the challenges that were ahead within a program and within life, building your team. So again, surrounding yourself by those positive, supportive people that they can rely on and learn to trust, and then play on. So even with being faced with different adversities in sport or in life, you can then stay positive and never give up within that path. So again, being intentional in selecting 3 skills that were really important and relevant to that particular population in that context. And the program staff would then talk about these skills and have activities associated with these skills throughout their programming. In addition to picking those life skills, we also needed to be intentional with our program structure. So going back to how do we actually get to those life skill outcomes, we need to think about how we can work those 3 skills in, and setting up a particular program structure that we can adapt and best meet the needs of the youth. So for example, I'm not going to go through the entire thing, but something such as team time at the top right there, that was something that we made sure that there was time at the end of the program to debrief, everybody come together and have a chat about what went well today, what didn't go well, maybe talk about one of those particular bounce back skills and how they could apply those skills beyond the program in which they've learned. So how would something like build your team be applicable within a school context or at home, etc. So again, having those intentional conversations around life skill transfer. So as part of the evaluation team, we were hired to do 3 main things. That was evaluate the staff training, evaluate the program delivery and program processes, and then also evaluate the outcomes associated with the program. And that was mainly looking at youth outcomes. So this was a really exciting, fun opportunity that again started about 4 or 5 years ago, and we've now evolved over the past several years, had several iterations and adaptations throughout the program. And again, that evaluation was so important about constantly learning and improving the programming, and worked with the Boys and Girls Club staff to make sure that we were meeting the needs and it was feasible to actually implement and sustain within the actual Boys and Girls Club setting. So again, that importance of ongoing monitoring and evaluation led us to make sure that in our 3 pilot sites, we were having that solid program and that foundational program that we were confident with before we began to expand and scale that program out. So it's been exciting to see over the past 4 years, almost 5 years now, that we've gone from those 3 sites that we're now at over 15 sites across Canada, and that uptake of staff that have now been able to been trained in trauma-informed practices have been really, really neat. So we've been able to reach over 600 youth to date over those past 4 years. And one of the things that has been particularly rewarding to see is, and something that we focused on from the outset, is that notion of capacity building within a community organization. So we developed kind of that one sport-based program, but the training on trauma-informed approaches can be applied across all youth, all different Boys and Girls Club programs. So Boys and Girls Clubs saw the value and the importance of weaving these trauma-informed principles into the fabric of their Boys and Girls Club as a whole. And what we found from the leader's perspective or the staff perspective is that it has been so valuable that they've been able to apply the skills that they learned as staff to other programs other than just this one Bounce Back League program. Additionally, the importance of sustainability is really there. So having ongoing communication, having those champions at our 3 initial pilot sites that have been so valuable as kind of our mentors for the new sites that are adopting the program, that people can kind of use as sounding boards, ask questions, go to for resources, and check in has been really, really great and important and helpful in our sustainability plan so far. So right now, kind of where we're sitting right now, we're wrapping up our 5-year grant. Obviously, COVID has forced us to pivot to online programming, which is only natural, and that's been fun to navigate in and of itself. But we've also been successful in getting a SSHRC grant, which has allowed us to pivot to virtual training. So this aligns quite well with our sustainability plan. The plan was to continue to scale this program up across Canada to enhance reach and accessibility of these trauma-informed practices. And now with being able to then pivot to virtual training, we can further achieve that goal by having it be more accessible and reaching more people. So we're just diving into that right now and really excited to see where that goes. And then, as I mentioned, going back to that notion of complete package and thinking about my own research program, I have a huge passion for and commitment to knowledge translation. And knowledge translation has been such a big part of this particular project, and doing it in a way that's accessible and relevant to the wide variety of different stakeholders that were involved. So thinking about community organizations and the program staff, doing reports, having regular presentations and check-in meetings with those people on the front line, management level staff, our funders. Also thinking about different ways that we can communicate through, say, for example, trauma-informed principles. So I've published a blog on trauma-informed principles through the CIRC website. Again, just to reinforce and speak to how trauma-insensitive practices can be applied in all different contexts and are beneficial for all youth. And then thinking about other different ways, moving beyond, again, our publications, our presentation at conferences, but it does take time, but it's very, very important to make sure that we're doing this at a community level. So just an example of a fact sheet, quick infographic that we shared, kind of, here are some 1-year preliminary findings. Let's talk through that as a group, share it informally, but allow opportunities for keeping people up to date that are directly involved with the programming. Okay, so I will maybe take a quick pause there if anybody has any questions about that program, or I'm happy to answer them now. Maybe I'll do that, and then if not, we can dive into the next one and save questions to the end. All good?
I had a quick question, if I could,
Absolutely.
Corliss, that you maybe sort of had a bit of the information in that little graphic at the end, but sort of how many youth did you sort of hope to have in a group? Like when you talk about the team skills and that at the end and sort of the interaction, what number do you see as the sweet spot sort of thing?
Yeah, great question. You mean like per program?
Yeah.
So, yeah, so each site would typically take no more than 12 youth within a program, so it's pretty small. Anywhere from 8 to 12 would be what would be normal, and what we found to be kind of that sweet spot for in-person programming. Virtual programming is a little bit of a different ball game, and more or less that's just trying to continue to engage youth, and we're just seeing a lot lower numbers just because, like all of us, they're burdened with overuse of screen time. But in person, it's been anywhere from 8 to 12 being kind of that ideal group. And we get to, like, each program session is about 8 to 10 weeks, and then they get to pick a sport that they are, as a group or by Clubhouse, they pick a sport that is relevant for the youth or something that they're really keen to. So we've seen typical basketball, soccer, but we've also been able to get outside and do different sports if it's a spring season or a summer season. So a lot of flexibility there. The sport itself is more just kind of that vehicle, as long as it has that physical activity component as well. Excellent. Okay, so maybe I'll switch gears and dive into my second case here. And this is near and dear to our UBC crew here. And essentially after 8 years of working in youth development, and it's particularly in community sport programming, I joined the Diabetes Prevention Research Group at UBC Okanagan. And this is where my expertise in working with community organizations and my expertise in evaluation really came into play, but in a very different context. However, there were a lot of different overlaps. Instead of youth, our team was working with the YMCA to offer a very intentional evidence-based program that aimed to give adults the necessary psychosocial skills that they needed to reduce their risk of developing type 2 diabetes, and that they could apply to their daily life. So skills such as self-regulation, self-compassion, and so on. So this, for me, it was a bit of a leap, but also not too far from my comfort zone, and felt that I could really contribute to the lab in that way. So for those who aren't familiar with the Small Steps for Big Changes program, this is a 3-week diet and physical activity counseling program aimed to reduce the risk for developing type 2 diabetes within a community setting. So in joining the DPRG 3 years ago, I immediately saw a need to dive in and see how the program was being delivered. So thinking about that evaluation component. And again, we have an idea of what we want our outcomes to be in terms of lowering those risks of developing type 2 diabetes, but how can we unpack and look at the program structure? So look at the program processes, how it's being delivered to make sure that we are leading to those intended outcomes. So I'm going to put a bit of a busy slide on here for you, but I will direct your attention to basically this just gives you an overview of how the program has gone through a number of different phases of transitioning, starting at a lab-based intervention, was tested for efficacy and effectiveness. And essentially I jumped in at phase 4 there, in phase 4, we worked with a partnership, or we had a partnership with the YMCA established. However, the program was still being delivered by trained researchers at UBC. So my work in the project really came in phase 5, and it was great timing where we began to transition the program into the YMCA and also transition that ownership of who was actually running the program to YMCA staff instead of us. So again, looking at that notion of sustainability and really working towards making this work for the community. So within this phase 5 that we started to work towards transitioning that ownership, we were fortunate to secure a Michael Smith Foundation REACH grant. And this is essentially a 1-year knowledge translation grant. And this grant really enabled us to have important necessary conversations to integrate equality programming into the YMCA. So things like co-creating a vision and a mission for the partnership, establishing terms of references, agreeing upon different roles and responsibilities, and establishing an implementation plan, but also an implementation team. So never underestimate the opportunity to take time to do those things. That was so important for framing the success of the foundation of this program and this partnership. So it was definitely a blessing in disguise to have the opportunity to have these important conversations when we had the opportunity to do so. So this small 1-year grant in the grand scheme of things really set the stage for us quite nicely. And in that, it led to us being able to secure a Shirk Partnership Engage grant, where we could then pilot the delivery of the Small Steps for Big Changes program led by YMCA staff. And again, we started small at 1 site. We have now scaled out to 2 sites. And then we worked with the team to evaluate the delivery and the effectiveness of this program being run by the YMCA staff. So just like the Bounce Back League, ongoing monitoring and evaluation was so important. And not only in both of these programs was using evidence-based frameworks and evidence-based practices in the program planning and delivery phase really important, but also in the evaluation phase. So using frameworks and tools like the REAIM framework, different things like that have been really helpful to be able to, again, monitor that ongoing processes, making sure that we're adapting and improving to meeting the needs of the community, and kind of making sure that we're doing that in an iterative process. So we had a massive team and still have a massive team who are undertaking all different pieces of this program. And it's been amazing to work with each and every individual as part of this, kind of carving out their own little niche. And my niche as part of that, in addition to the evaluating piece, was really working with community champion to work through that process and have them involved throughout the entire process, and making sure that we were, again, continuing to meet the needs of the community, not only at the YMCA, but also the clients, the community members who are also engaging in the program as well. And for me, that notion of capacity building was also really, really important, just like as it was at the Boys and Girls Club. At an organizational level, the trainers, the frontline staff, they really learned the importance of the important counseling skills necessary to be effective in developing and delivering this program. And again, they spoke about being able to transfer those skills, those motivational interviewing skills, to other areas in their YMCA programming. So other roles at the YMCA, between staff, with clients in different capacities. So that was really, really neat to see. But then thinking about more at the managerial level, some unanticipated outcomes that came out is from having such a collaborative process with a lot of the management staff, such as the individual who's co-authored on this publication, Carlene, who is a manager at the YMCA. She spoke a lot about building her own capacity and the organization capacity around program evaluation. And that was really neat to see that, that shift in, again, being able to apply what they've learned around program evaluation from being involved in this program to other areas, other programming areas as well. So just like the Bounce Back League, we are also, with COVID, pivoting this program to not only virtual programming, but also virtual training as well. And we have been able, again, we're kind of right in the thick of things as we work to navigate both of those. And it's been a really neat and fun experience to do that. And I know we have some people likely on this webinar who are strongly or heavily involved in both of these pieces. So stay tuned. They might also be giving a talk on this one day, and I can give you an update on how things are going. But I think, again, these pieces are a blessing in disguise, in that the ultimate goal of working with these community organizations in this program stems for sustainability and scale out. And a good way that we can do this is by transitioning to virtual, particularly training and programming, so that we can enhance our reach and accessibility for a program in rural and remote areas, but also thinking about how we can actually continue to reach YMCAs across Canada who might be interested in that. Is one way to do that is through virtual training. So in here, I'm also wanting to share a few different ideas or things that came out in terms of knowledge translation. Again, working with the community needs around different reports that we continually develop and report back, whether that's formally or informally, creating videos for promotion that we share. And we share updates through. We have a pretty good presence on social media, so doing things such as graphic facilitation, being able to share all of those tools have been really, really critical in generating additional program interest and helping with scaling out. We've also created a newsletter based on not only client need, but also organizational request, which again allows us to promote the program and different things that are going on, but we also profile different trainers or clients and share their updates and their progress. So again, just a different way to be able to generate interest and also help with that ultimate goal of scaling out. But again, doing it in very accessible ways beyond just our typical presentations at conferences and publications as well. So our next step, again, now that we have all of our ducks in a row, we have transitioned to virtual training in combination with creating all these accessible knowledge products, has set us up quite nicely for being able to scale this program out. So similar to Bounce Back League, we're currently working on that program, kind of that process. And what has been really helpful is having those community champions be knowledge brokers, but also be ambassadors for the program, so that when we do get interest from people across Canada who say, I'd love to embed and take on the Small Steps for Big Changes program within Canada, or within my club, how do we do that? And we can have meaningful conversations with people who have actually lived and breathed the on the ground, rather than it just come from the researchers, that the YMCA staff can say, you know what, this is how it works in our site, feasibly in practice. So that's been really, really great to have as well. So although two very, very different programs, a few things that I kind of wanted to highlight. Hopefully I was able to draw some parallels yourself as going through that, but kind of some key considerations or lessons learned is the notion of these partnerships are so valuable, but they do take time. And just thinking about how each partner brings important strengths to the table, and the importance of having that ongoing communication is so, so important. So in both cases, we have regular monthly meetings or calls. We ensure joint decision making. And again, you need to be fully committed to the community and to working collaboratively as we go through this. And again, everybody brings their own strengths. So while this, for example, Small Steps could have run quite well in a lab setting, integrating this into a community setting is very different. So making sure that we have our partner with their fingers on the pulse has also been so helpful to make us have the necessary adjustments to be able to deliver this feasibly and sustainably in the community program. Additionally, for me, as I've highlighted quite a few times, that passion and dedication for knowledge translation, just like effective partnerships take time, so does knowledge translation. And although I would argue that knowledge translation is always important and necessary in research, it particularly is at the community level. And again, making sure that we're doing this in relevant and accessible ways to stakeholders, and finding out what that is. So talking to your community partners to figure out what it is and how best to communicate that information is really important. And then in both, and I didn't get into too much of the evidence-based pieces in terms of how each program was developed or even evaluated, just for the sake of time, but that using those evidence-based practices, frameworks, models, theories to go by, that's one area of expertise that we can bring as researchers, are those evidence-based practices. So making sure that we're doing that and providing those, and working the other way, that ongoing monitoring and evaluation is critical. And that's how we actually develop our evidence-based practices, is by making sure this works on the ground. So again, that reciprocal relationship is so important. And then last but not least, that notion of community capacity building is really important, and has been really neat to see some kind of expected outcomes, but also some unanticipated outcomes. And again, we go back to really the importance of being intentional and working to transfer those skill sets in other areas, and again, helping to lead for sustainability in the long term, which is the ultimate goal. So I wanted to take the last couple minutes or so just to share a few tips about what I've learned so far. So obviously I'm still learning and adapting and very new in my academic position, but I do have 10 years now of living and breathing grad school and all those sorts of fun things. So I wanted to share some free tips for you. Advice is free, so take it or leave it. But one of the main things, other than I would say hard work pays off, is surround yourself with good people. And I guess I use the term good loosely here in terms of what does that actually mean, but I can attribute so much of my success to amazing mentors, lab mates, colleagues that I've surrounded myself with over the past several years. That connection is key, both at the academic level, but also in community organizations. Especially now more than ever, that connection is so important. So just making sure that you're there for one another and taking time to make time for important conversations and having time together. My other tip would be, there's no one right way to do things. Essentially just do what's best for you. I've always prided myself on not caring what other people think and marching to the beat of your own drum. And a mentor reminded me just more recently than yeah, just a couple of weeks ago, the importance of course, having those mentors and getting advice and seeking advice, but ultimately, most of the people that you get advice from already have jobs, or they have their degree, or they're tenured. So ultimately, it's you that are living with the consequences, whether those consequences are positive or negative. So again, do what's best for you. So for example, my decision to stay at the same university for all 3 degrees was something that was, you always hear one way or the other, whether or not that's frowned upon or okay. And ultimately, it's you making that decision. So just be comfortable and happy and confident that you are making a decision that's best for you. Taking initiative and getting involved, I wouldn't be as productive and as well connected, or even have been associated with UBC in any way if I didn't do those things. So put yourself in a good position to be competitive. Again, being criticized, for me, doing all my degrees at the same institution, it comes down to ultimately do what's best for you. But for me, working to make those community partnerships and those connections take time. And that was the main reason why I stayed at the University of Ottawa for so many years, was because you take time and invest time to craft those really important and valuable partnerships. So having said that, I also worked really hard to collaborate with other researchers other than my own supervisor, both within and beyond my university. You never know when that connection or simply a conversation you have might open a door or change your life path forever. So I definitely encourage you to get out there and make those connections. Time management and efficiency are key. So I would pride myself on being a very efficient person. And I'm not saying that you need to work like crazy or work fast, and that means that it's good work. I mean, you'd be surprised how much you get done in 20 minutes. If you turn your email off, put your phone away, don't look at social media, you'll get a lot done. So things that we've started to do at UBC and in our lab prior to was do Pomodoros, do writing days with colleagues, even just setting a timer and see how much you get done in that 20 minutes, and then you have a little bit of a break. But definitely would advocate for kind of doing blocking those important things in, writing, making goals that are process oriented, and really focusing on different pieces that way. And then last but not least is really thinking about knowing your limits. Again, I think now more than ever, this is so important. I'm grounded in a positive psychology background, and I really work to practice what I preach. So setting boundaries, learning to say no, scheduling breaks. I schedule my physical activity into my schedule, otherwise it doesn't happen. But I keep it as it's a meeting and nobody gets to touch that, because my physical health and ultimately my mental health from that is a priority for me. So trying to do that, sometimes it's difficult, but just thinking about what that looks like for you is super important. And again, the more efficient you are, the more time you'll have for making physical and mental health a priority for you. Okay, I'm gonna finish with, so those are kind of some tips and tricks that I usually give, but I wanted to maybe share a couple last things before, I know we're running out of time, so I'll be super quick. For me, big thing is always learning and always improving. We're in grad school because we like to ask questions and we're interested and we're passionate. So I would encourage you to, again, set goals for yourself, thinking about both soft and hard skills. So maybe you want to be a better writer, maybe you want to be better at time management, thinking about using this as a great opportunity in grad school to be able to do those things, to set those goals and always work to improve and get better. And then also thinking about, as I started to talk about your package at the beginning, thinking about what skills you have that are transferable. So I talked about it a lot within these community contexts. But also for me, evaluation has been something that is a very transferable skill. Regardless of the context, it's something that's used by a lot of community organizations. It has led into different teaching opportunities for me, different service opportunities. So just thinking about what is it for you that makes you stand out and that you can apply beyond just your traditional academic realm. And then last but not least is to set yourself up for success. And that success can be different for everyone. So don't feel like you need to follow that linear path. Do whatever you can along the way, though, to put yourself in that ideal position to be competitive or successful for whatever that success is for you. So again, really start thinking about your package and establish your niche. So hopefully today you're able to see kind of how I attempted to weave these different elements throughout my research, but also I weave these elements into my teaching by focusing on like holistic student development, all of my community service and university services related to healthy youth development and in sport organizations. And then also thinking about when your dream job posting or your next grant or scholarship application comes, what are your greatest strengths, your greatest qualities, what makes you stand out around the rest, why should you get this job over others? And really, again, use this as an opportunity throughout grad school to develop that, establish that niche and develop the skill set that you need so that when the time comes that you're ready to apply for that grant application or that dream job or that postdoc, that you are ready to do so. So with that, I will leave it there and just again say thank you for everyone who has joined.
Excellent. Thank you, Corliss, for a great talk and some sage advice that I think all students and postdocs could benefit from. And I mean, even I could use the time management skills. So always good to have that highlighted. So it's been a little while since we've had a talk. I'll just remind everyone that if you have a question, if you could send it to me via the chat function, that way Corliss can just relax and we can feed the questions to her one at a time. If you wish to just ask it yourself, you can just say, Chris, I have a question, and then I'll call on you. If your microphone isn't keyed up or your video isn't working and you want me to ask the question, type it out in full, please.
Chris, I have a question.
Fire away, Sarah.
Okay, Corliss, that was a really great presentation, and it was cool to just see how you kind of have developed over the years and the different projects that you've dipped your toes into, and it was certainly inspiring for me. I guess my one of your takeaways was about like building capacity for the community organizations, and I find that really interesting. It's something that's come up for me as well. And it is quite a daunting task, I feel like, to do that, and it involves like a number of things. And I'm just wondering like what some of the strategies have been for you to build capacity and also what that looks like for an organization.
Yeah, that's a great question. I think kind of starting out right from the outset is having that open, ongoing communication to understand what the community needs are, where their areas for growth are. And I think then you continue to learn and evolve around the along the way. So obviously we were very intentional with both programs, having staff training to then build. They're building their skill set and building their capacity. It was neat again to see those more unanticipated outcomes emerge in terms of how they were able to transfer that. We didn't have intentional conversations with them about how they could apply that. That is something that we could have done probably, and maybe been able to foster or facilitate even greater transfer. But again, I think having the involvement along the way and those like open communication, having it a truly collaborative process has been really, really helpful, because again, if we as researchers just dove in and said, okay, we're here to evaluate, they would never have developed kind of that evaluation capacity that they could then apply and use and support us with. We all come up with, the nerd in me is excited about evaluation, having these great evaluation plans, and then they don't actually work in practice, or it's not feasible, or it's burdensome to our stakeholders or our participants. So again, making sure that the evaluation plan is co-created and developed so that it is feasible. And then they then also take on some of that ownership of those pieces and get to develop those skill sets along the way. Hopefully that helps answer a little bit.
Yes, thank you.
Yeah, no worries. Thanks for asking, Sarah.
Okay, I'll call on Mary next, please.
Thanks for the great talk, Corliss. This is the breadth of your work. I didn't know anything about the bounce back program, so that was really interesting, and obviously lots of parallels. I'm wondering if, I mean, when you're getting calls now to do these talks with youth recs, and I know that's part of your work that you didn't talk about, it's not in the tens of people, it's in the hundreds of people that you're now giving these talks to, which is incredible. And I'm wondering if you have tips for all of us on how to present to non-academic audiences, because clearly they like what you're doing.
Yeah, absolutely. So maybe just to give a quick background context for those that are less familiar. So Youth Rex is essentially, it's not an organization, but it's a government funded initiative housed at York University. And essentially the mission of the organization is to build capacity in youth serving organizations around program evaluation and evidence-based practices. So I started working there in my PhD, throughout my postdoc, and I now sit on as a member of an academic network. But I also got hired there to develop and teach an evaluation course to frontline workers and program staff, program management. So no academics, there are a few. I know Sarah, I think, is one of them that has taken this course. But again, it's free, it's openly accessible to anybody. I think we've now reached close to 3,000 people have gone through the course across Ontario. So there's obviously a need there. And it's been amazing to, I would say it's helped me in my academic teaching a lot to make sure that we are using that plain language, using it accessibly. Some of the tips and tricks, I would say, for me have been really, really helpful. Not necessarily the way you verbally communicate, but giving opportunities for engagement across participants. So them having an opportunity to learn from each other has been really helpful. So having intentional discussion board questions and prompts so that they can be like, oh, I also had this experience, and they build off each other and see that there's other people in the youth sector that are also navigating or experiencing these challenges, or learning different best practices that way has been really, really neat. And then also something that's been really helpful has been providing resources that are, again, accessible, that they can take with them away. So whether that's tools and templates that they can then leave and go and develop a logic model when they're ready, or that's just like a checklist of, okay, this is how I actually make sure that my report is readable when I am ready to send it to my community stakeholders, all different ways, but kind of having those resources available so that they can take, rather than an academic article that, yes, it's open access, which means they can access it, but is it actually accessible to them? So thinking about different ways like that, using multiple different mediums has been really helpful in doing so. So definitely, these courses are all taught online, and I've been teaching them for 3 years. So it has been a blessing in disguise having to navigate into and pivot into online teaching throughout COVID. Just being able to borrow some of those tips and tricks have been really, really helpful.
I have one
Hey,
more.
thanks very much. So the next one then would be Kendra, please.
Thanks so much, Corliss. I just jumped right in front of you, Chris. Sorry. So thanks so much for your talk, Corliss. Your experiences are super multi-sectoral, and I think that you gave a really comprehensive overview, and it really helped me kind of think and see how I could incorporate some of your tips into my own research. Not too sure how yet. The productivity thing is definitely a bit difficult right now, but doing my best. But throughout your experiences with partnership development, your team, as you mentioned, has been super interdisciplinary and collaborative. One of your grants that you received through Michael Smith, of course, was developing a unified mission and kind of shared goals. Do you have any tips or recommendations for how you can work towards developing a shared goal? I can imagine at times it's probably difficult to turn off the researcher brain and not come into these conversations kind of with predetermined opinions and outcomes. So just wondering if you have any tips or suggestions for that.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a really great question. Thanks, Kendra. So I think one of the really valuable things that we did from the outset was having a meeting facilitator attend those meetings so that we were both put on the same level playing field, that there was no hierarchy, there was no power dynamic or anything like that. We both came as two equal partners to the table, and we had a meeting facilitator navigate and run us through different exercises. She was fabulous that we went through and kind of pushed our limits from both sides, and we're able to kind of work towards that. It took multiple different sessions. It wasn't like, okay, that was a good 2-hour meeting, we now have a mission and a vision, we're ready to go. It was definitely kind of an ongoing iterative process, and even taking that time away to digest, take it back to other people in your organization, have that opportunity for ongoing reflection, and then coming back to the table together to be able to iron that out. But I think it's similar to strategic planning. If anybody has kind of gone through that you set your sights high from the outset of like, okay, what do we want our long-term vision to be? Let's put our head in the clouds right from the outset, and then we'll work backwards from there. And I think it was neat to see that for us, luckily, we both, with our head in the clouds, had very similar goals of what we want this long-term vision to look like. And then it was just kind of scaling back, okay, what does this look like in the shorter term? What values do we have? And drawing from both our organizational values, like VPRG values, but also the YMCA values. And again, there was a lot of alignment there in terms of being client-centered, being authentic, those pieces like that. So that has been really, really helpful. But I think kind of starting big and then working your way back was also really great.
All right, well, I think we've sort of reached the stage where we're going to ask all of the sort of faculty to sign off so that our graduate students and postdocs have a few minutes to perhaps ask questions of Corliss that they feel better doing in a smaller environment. And then after that, I believe the grad students and postdocs are planning to potentially hang around and have a little bit of a social gathering. So thank you very much again, Corliss, for a great talk. And we look forward to seeing everyone again next month.
Excellent. Thanks so much, Chris. And thanks, Mary, as well for the intro and for joining.